That baby wasn't yours.
In 2006, the body of an infant girl was pulled from the muddy waters of the Yazoo River. The mother, barely 20 and grieving, was told it was her child, no further questions asked. 18 years later, a phone call shatters everything that baby wasn't yours. When a single black mother in Mississippi receives unexpected DNA results contradicting what police told her nearly 2 decades ago, she is thrust into a haunting search for the truth. With help from a local mortician and a former foster child turned ex-con, she uncovers a horrifying pattern, a black market adoption ring that operated beneath the surface of small-town systems, hospitals, churches, and social services. As her buried grief transforms into obsession, she must confront not only corrupt institutions, but the possibility that her daughter may still be alive and raised by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Quick heads up before we jump in. If you're into real stories, strange disappearances, and the kind of truths people try to bury, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Turn on the bell so you don't miss what comes next. All right, let's get into it. The phone buzzed like a warning. Unknown number. 662 area code. Delta Country. Home. Hello. Kina's voice was automatic, dry from the Georgia heat and a second cup of bitter church coffee. Is this Miss Kina Watts? The voice on the line was cautious, practiced female, mid-30s, maybe younger. No accent. Almost too careful. This is she. Who's calling? A pause. My name's Dr. Elena Ford. I'm a postdoctoral fellow with the Cold Case DNA Project at Ole Miss. I was hoping to speak with you about a case from 2006. File number 4879IA, body recovered from the Yazoo River. Kina's hand tightened around the phone. I don't talk about that. I understand, Elena replied softly. But I'm afraid there's a mistake in the file. The next sound was silence, not the quiet kind, but the heavy kind. Kina stood still in the kitchenette of her tiny apartment, staring out at her neighbor's rusted trampoline. What kind of mistake? She asked, her voice already lowering like a storm cloud. She felt it in her bones. Not grief, something sharper. Suspicion. The infant recovered in the Yazoo that August. According to your file, she was identified as your daughter, Harmony Watts, but we recently tested preserved genetic material against the state registry. That baby was not genetically related to you. Kina sat. The words didn't land like thunder. They landed like a vacuum, sucking all the air from the room. Excuse me? I've reviewed everything twice. The tissue samples were preserved properly. The lab secure. We ran 3 separate matches. Kina, that baby wasn't yours. Kina blinked. 17 years of forced forgetting, counseling, empty birthdays. All of it unraveled like rotting thread. Then where the hell is she? She whispered. I don't know yet, the woman said. But if you're open to it, I think we need to find out. Kina didn't sleep that night. She lay on the stiff apartment couch, the silence pressing on her chest like someone had left a cinder block there. Old dreams returned, Harmony wrapped in that soft green blanket from the hospital, her tiny hand curling around Kina's thumb. The way the nurse said, I'm sorry, like it was routine. They'd told her Harmony drowned. They'd said she wandered outside the daycare during a heat wave, that she fell into the river behind the building. An accident. A tragedy. No foul play. Kina had wanted to believe them. Needed to. She was barely 20, working shifts at the Waffle House and taking night classes. The grief had flattened her, turned her into smoke. No funeral, just a sealed box and a state-issued death certificate. But now the truth stood at her door, like a stranger in church clothes whispering, she's not gone. They lied to you. And Kina had questions. Big ones. The next morning, she packed a duffel bag, called out of work, and drove east across the Georgia state line. She was going back to the Delta, back to Yazoo County, back to find out who buried someone else's child in her daughter's name. The Yazoo County courthouse still smelled like paper and mildew. Kina stepped inside wearing a plain t-shirt, jeans, and a denim jacket that hadn't fit right since before Harmony was born. She looked like any other woman returning home after too long older, quieter, a little harder in the face. The receptionist didn't look up, just kept typing behind the glass. "Excuse me," Kina said, gently knocking. "I'm here to see the coroner's file from 2006. File 4879, The woman finally glanced up, chewing something slow. She blinked twice. Ain't no public access to coroner files. "You got a case number?" Kina took a breath. "I said it already, 4879A. The Watts file. August 2006. Baby girl." That made the woman pause. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. "You family?" "I'm the mother." Her lips tightened. She stared at Kina for a long second, as if weighing the weight of that sentence. Then, wordlessly, she slid a clipboard under the glass. "Sign here. Sit over there. I'll call someone." Kina signed with a shaky hand. Her name, Kina R. Watts, looked foreign after all this time, like a name that had existed in a different life. She sat beneath a ceiling fan that turned so slow it was almost disrespectful. 20 minutes passed, then 30. She was about to get up when a tall man stepped out in khakis and a collared shirt the color of bad mayonnaise. "Ms. Watts?" Kina stood. "That's me." He looked her over, cautious. "I'm Paul Dennings, interim coroner." "You weren't here in 2006, she said. He shook his head. "That was Mr. Oscar Langston. He passed away 3 years back. I took over when the county restructured." "You asked about the infant file from '06? "Yes," Kina said, "because that infant wasn't mine." Dennings didn't flinch, but his eyes narrowed. "Is that what you believe? Or what someone told you?" "It's what I know. DNA doesn't lie. The Cold Case Project contacted me." Her voice stayed level, but there was heat underneath it. "Y'all labeled that baby as Harmony Watts. That baby was not Harmony." The man gave a tired sigh. "I'll pull the archive." He led her to a records room down a narrow hall, where the smell of old paper and rusted metal was stronger than the air conditioning. He unlocked a dented file cabinet, thumbing through manila folders. "Here," he said finally, pulling out a thin file marked in red ink. 4879 Watts H. He laid it flat on the table. Kina didn't sit. She hovered, scanning the faded pages. Autopsy report. Photos taken at the scene. Fingerprint cards blank, because the baby was too young. Death certificate. She reached the DNA confirmation letter only. It wasn't there. "This is incomplete." Dennings raised an eyebrow. "That's everything that was transferred over when I took office." "Where's the DNA match report?" she asked. "They said they matched Harmony's blood to the body." "That's what the officer told me, Detective Harris." Dennings flipped through the folder again. "No such report in here. Might have been filed under the law enforcement case folder, not ours." "No," Kina said firmly. "It should be here. You declared her dead. You labeled that baby as mine." A long silence filled the space. Then Dennings finally said, "If what you're saying is true, that's serious. That would make this an open case again. It was never closed. It was buried." She stared at the file, then at the name Oscar Langston scribbled at the bottom of the death certificate. "Do you know who was working in the morgue back then?" she asked. He paused. Morgue was under contract. Small operation outside of town, still run by one of the old black funeral homes. Samuels and Sons. Her heart stopped. Jeremiah Samuels? Yeah, old man Jeremiah. His son runs it now. Kina stepped back from the table like it had caught fire. I know him, she said. Dennings tilted his head. From where? She looked at him. He was Harmony's godfather. The sign out front hadn't changed Samuels and Sons mortuary, in chipped black paint over dusty gray brick. She parked under a pecan tree, the limbs low and tangled, just like she remembered them. She wasn't sure what she expected. Jeremiah Samuels had been her mother's friend. Back when Kina was young, she remembered him bringing peach cobbler to church socials and always sitting in the last pew. A tall, thin man with sharp eyes and a quiet laugh. When Kina was pregnant, he'd come by with a crib someone donated and a box of newborn clothes, yellow, green, blue. No pink, he'd said. Let her pick her color later. But after Harmony died, he'd disappeared. Now, 18 years later, Kina walked through the mortuary doors and was hit with the clean, sterile scent of embalming powder and lily. Behind the counter stood a man in his 40s with his father's face. Hi, he said, eyes wary. Can I help you? She cleared her throat. I'm looking for Jeremiah. He hesitated. You mean my father? Yes. Tell him Kina Watts is here. The man studied her, then stepped into the back room. A minute passed, then 2. Then footsteps. When Jeremiah Samuels appeared, his beard was white now, but his eyes were the same sharp, unreadable. He stopped a few feet away. Kina, he said quietly. I need to know what happened to my daughter, she said. The silence that followed felt like a verdict. Jeremiah's mouth twitched, and then he said, Baby girl, you sure you're ready for that? The mortuary office was cold, not from the air, but from what it kept inside. Jeremiah Samuels stood behind a cluttered desk, his fingers tapping the wood like he was counting seconds or sins. Kina sat across from him, her hands folded tight in her lap. She hadn't touched the sweet tea his son offered. The ice had melted. Jeremiah hadn't spoken in a full minute. Then he opened a drawer, pulled out a small manila envelope, and set it gently between them. I never thought I'd have to hand this to you, he said, but I knew one day it would come back around. Kina stared at the envelope. Her fingers wouldn't move. What is it? A copy, Jeremiah said, of the original intake photo, from the night the baby came in. The one they said was Harmony. He leaned forward, voice low. That child wasn't your daughter, Kina. I knew it the moment I unwrapped the towel. Kina's chest tightened. Then why didn't you say something? Her voice cracked under the question. Jeremiah didn't flinch. Because the sheriff said not to. Her whole body froze. You let them bury another baby in my child's name? I didn't let them do anything, he said firmly. I tagged the body Jane Doe, like protocol says when there's no match. Told Oscar Langston he was the coroner back then. He said it was probably a paperwork mix-up. Told me to hold the body for a couple days while they sorted it out. Kina's voice sharpened. But then they gave me a sealed casket and said it was Harmony. Jeremiah nodded, slowly. Because somewhere between me logging her in and the burial being arranged, the label got changed. I pushed. I called Langston. Called the sheriff. Even called the pastor. And they told you to let it go. He nodded again. Told me if I kept poking, they'd take my license. Said the mother you needed closure, that you were fragile, that it was better this way. Kina stood so fast her chair scraped back. I wasn't fragile. I was grieving. And y'all lied to me. Jeremiah's voice was still calm. I didn't lie, Kina. I kept a copy of that intake photo. I wrote everything down in a letter. Sealed it. Figured one day the truth would find its way to you. She stared at the envelope. The air was thick with rot and regret. Her hands finally moved. She opened it. Inside was a Polaroid. Faded, but clear enough. The baby in the picture was not Harmony. Not even close. This baby had lighter skin, No birthmark near the left collarbone. Eyes still slightly open gray, not brown. Kina's knees gave out. She sank into the chair. A single tear fell. "I've lived for 18 years thinking my baby drowned," she whispered. "I know," Jeremiah said, "and I'm sorry." She looked up. Her eyes were steel now. Who was the sheriff in 2006? John Luther, retired, moved to Greenville after the flood. Kina tucked the photo back into the envelope and stood. Her voice was no longer shaking. "Then Greenville's my next stop." Jeremiah hesitated. "Kina, there's something else." She paused in the doorway. When that baby was brought in, she wasn't alone. Kina turned. There was a second towel. "A second tag," he said. But no second body. Just a bracelet. Pink. Plastic. Like the kind from hospitals. He walked to the drawer again and pulled out a Ziplocked item. Inside it was a cracked hospital ID band, smudged but legible. Faded blue letters spelled. Watts, Harmony. The 9th of August, '06. 6 pounds, 13 ounces. Kina's mouth parted, but no sound came out. "I kept it," Jeremiah said, "because I didn't understand how it got there. And because I hoped, maybe, just maybe." Kina touched the plastic bag like it was holy. "Then someone had her," she said, "and planted the bracelet to throw y'all off." Jeremiah nodded solemnly. "Somebody wanted you to think she was dead." Kina gripped the bracelet. "They made me grieve for a ghost." Greenville sat along the river like it had something to hide. Old brick storefronts, rusted fences, and streets with names like Hope and Liberty that hadn't seen either in decades. Kina parked outside a faded one-story house with sun-worn siding and a crooked mailbox that read Luther in peeling black letters. The grass was knee-high. Porch light on in the daytime, either a sign of forgetfulness or guilt. She stood at the door for a long time before knocking. The man who answered didn't look like the sheriff from her memory. His face had collapsed into itself, pale skin, sagging jowls, gray stubble like ash around his jaw. A faded Ole Miss cap sat lopsided on his head. He blinked at her like she was a ghost. "You John Luther?" He nodded slowly. "Used to be." Kina lifted the envelope. "Then we need to talk." He didn't invite her in so much as step aside. The inside of the house smelled like smoke, whiskey, and old plastic. Fox News murmured from a TV in the corner. A recliner sat like a throne in the middle of the room, stained and surrounded by pill bottles on TV trays. Kina didn't sit. She stood by the fireplace, staring at the photos on the mantel. Luther in uniform. Luther shaking hands with some politician. Luther next to a buck he'd shot in '89. "You remember August 2006? She asked. He snorted. "That's a hell of a long time ago." "Not when it's the year your daughter died," Kina snapped. That got his attention. He looked up slowly. "You Kina Watts. I am." He rubbed the back of his neck, bones shifting under skin. "You here to sue me or shoot me? I want the truth." Luther shifted in his recliner, let out a long breath. "I told them this day would come." "Who's them?" He didn't answer. Kina pulled the photo from the envelope, set it on the coffee table in front of him. "The baby. The wrong baby. Why did you lie to me?" Luther stared at the image like it was a piece of his own past that had clawed its way back. Langston confirmed the match. He muttered, "Said the body was yours. We trusted the system." "Don't feed me that," Kina said. "Langston's dead. The funeral home never tagged her as Harmony, and the DNA says otherwise. You signed off on a false identity." Luther's eyes narrowed. "You think you're the first mother to lose a child in Yazoo County?" "No," she said, "but I might be the last to stay quiet about it." He grunted. "You don't understand how things worked back then. Lot of babies passed through hands that didn't ask too many questions." Kina's heart kicked harder. "Passed through where?" she asked. Luther's jaw clenched. He looked away. Sometimes folks wanted babies, and sometimes mamas didn't want 'em. We had a way of making sure they went where they'd be raised, right, quietly, off the books, no paperwork. Especially if the mother was young, poor, black. The words were acid. You sold babies. I didn't sell nothing, Luther barked. I facilitated. There were lawyers, churches, private homes. Hell, even nurses in on it. You think I profited off this? I protected kids from going into the system. Kina stepped closer, shaking. You protected the people who took them. He didn't deny it. I was told Harmony drowned, she said, that she walked out of daycare and fell into that river. He looked at her then, real and slow. She never walked out, Kina. That door was locked. She was taken. The room went still. Taken? She whispered. We found a towel down by the shed behind the daycare. Footprints, size 11 boot. Drag marks. But Langston said to leave it out of the report. Why? Kina covered her mouth. Luther leaned forward, coughing hard into a napkin. When he pulled it away, she saw red. I got emphysema. Ain't long for much. She didn't respond. He reached under the recliner and pulled out a yellowing folder, thick with papers. Here, case notes I kept. Things I wasn't supposed to write down. Kina took it, hands trembling. Inside, old reports, a map of the daycare property, a list of frequent visitors to the facility, including a name circled in red ink. Dr. Belinda Crane, private pediatrician, licensed in Louisiana and Mississippi. She was in charge of several infant placements, Luther muttered. Smooth operator. Had a license, ran a practice, worked with certain families, especially wealthy white couples from Jackson to Baton Rouge. Kina stared at the name like it was a match struck in her soul. She took Harmony, she said, more breath and sound. Luther just looked at her. You want to know where your daughter is? He said, start with her. Kina stood, folder clutched to her chest. I will. As she turned to leave, Luther said one last thing. Be careful. They got money, and they don't like their ghosts showing up. The sign outside the clinic read, Dr. Belinda Crane, M.D. Family Pediatrics and Neonatal Counseling. Baton Rouge, Louisiana. White brick, green shutters, and a spotless lawn that said we don't make mistakes here. Inside, it smelled like lavender hand soap and printer paper. Mothers with strollers lined the chairs, whispering between snacks and screens. Kina sat near the window, holding Luther's folder in a plain leather bag and watching the receptionist like a hawk. This wasn't a confrontation. Not yet. This was reconnaissance. The woman behind the counter, young, white, blonde ponytail, looked up and smiled with professional warmth. Hi, you have an appointment? Yes, Kina lied. New patient. My name's Kayla Washington. The receptionist clicked her keyboard, nodded. Got you here? Pediatric consult? Yep. Dr. Crane's running a little behind, but you'll be next after the Sims baby. Kina nodded, forcing a smile. Her stomach felt like stone. She watched everything. The photos on the wall, newborns, toddlers, smiling parents. All white. Every single one. The pamphlets, adoption support services, postnatal trauma therapy, faith-based birth planning. And then, tucked in the magazine rack, she spotted a tri-fold brochure printed in dull blue and beige. The title, Covenant Placement Partners. Kina slid it into her purse without blinking. 30 minutes passed before they called her name. Dr. Belinda Crane didn't look like a baby thief. She looked like someone's favorite aunt. Mid-50s, honey-colored bob, tortoiseshell glasses. She wore a coral blazer and matching lipstick, her smile wide and polished. Kayla, right? She said, extending a hand. Kina shook it. Yes, ma'am. So what brings you in today? I'm looking to adopt, Kina said smoothly. I was told you. Help with that. Crane tilted her head. Well, I do a bit of placement advising for specific cases, usually only through referrals. I was referred by a friend in Yazoo County. Said you helped his family. Back in the day. Dr. Crane's smile didn't falter, but something in her eyes flicked an almost imperceptible shift. Oh? She said, keeping it light. Do you remember the name? Sheriff John Luther, Kina said. That did it. The doctor's smile twitched, just once. Then it returned like nothing happened. I'm afraid I don't know that name. Kina opened her purse and pulled out a photo. The Polaroid, the wrong baby. She slid it across the desk. I think you do. Dr. Crane looked at it, blinked, set it aside with deliberate calm. I don't recognize this child. She was passed off as mine. Her name was Harmony Watts. Dr. Crane's hands folded neatly over her. Planner. Miss Washington, if that's even your name, are you here as part of some investigation? No, Kina said quietly. I'm here as a mother. Crane's smile dropped. Kina leaned forward. You helped place babies off the record. I know you worked with the daycare in Yazoo. I know about the network. I know my daughter was taken. And I know you helped. Crane's voice lowered to a hush. I don't know what you think you're doing, but you need to leave. Now. I'm not leaving until I find my child. Crane stood. Then you'll be waiting a long damn time. She reached for the door. I know about covenant placement partners, Kina added. And I know the names circled in Luther's folder. Crane froze. Then, calmly, she opened the door. I suggest you go, Miss Watts, while you still have a car outside. Kina rose. Their eyes locked. I'll be back, she said. And next time, I won't be alone. Crane didn't respond. But as Kina walked past the waiting room, she noticed a woman holding a toddler, a pale, curly-haired little girl, clinging to her mother's arm. The mother's hand gently brushed the girl's hair back, revealing a small birthmark at the collarbone. Kina stopped, stared. The mark was identical to Harmony's. Her throat closed. Before she could speak, the receptionist called out, Ma'am, are you okay? Kina turned, fast walking out the front door before her knees gave way. She reached the car, slammed the door shut, and finally let the scream leave her throat. She was close. So close she could see it in the child's skin, the shape of her own past staring back at her. But if Harmony had been placed under a new name, under a new life, it meant finding her wasn't just about DNA anymore. It meant unraveling a system that had no intention of letting go. Kina didn't drive home that night. She found a cheap motel just outside Baton Rouge, $49.95 per night, cash only, with a Coke machine that wheezed like a dying man and a flickering security light that barely lit the parking lot. Room 12 smelled like bleach and something older. Still, she locked the door, pulled the blinds shut, and laid the covenant placement brochure out on the bed. Every name, every address, every phone number on the back had been folded under neatly, hidden, selective. She circled them in red pen. Then she opened Luther's folder again. And there it was scrawled in pencil, next to one of the names she'd seen earlier. J. Samuels, 3 transfers. See ledger. Kina froze. Jeremiah. She thought about the pink hospital bracelet. The way he'd looked at her when she asked if he was ready to tell the truth. She pulled out her phone and called. Jeremiah Samuels. He answered after the third ring. It's Kina. A pause. I figured. Why does Luther's file say you had a ledger? Another pause. Then a soft, tired exhale. I didn't want to go digging in it, Kina, but I kept one. Paper records. The kind nobody digitized. I'm coming now. By the time she reached the mortuary, the sun was just breaking over the tree-lined gold light, filtering through moss like fire behind lace. Jeremiah was already outside, waiting on the porch with a box in his lap. He didn't speak. just stood and opened the screen door for her. They sat at the prep room table, the place where bodies used to be washed and dressed for burial. Today, it held the weight of a different kind of death. Inside the box were years of handwritten records, carefully kept logs. Ledger Book 3 to 2004-2007. Jeremiah flipped to the back third, fingers tracing the lines. Here, he said, August 12, 2006, the night that baby came in. Kina read it slowly. The 12th of August, 06. Unidentified female infant. Tag 4879I. 6 pounds, est. 1-2 weeks old. Towel, pale green. Bracelet found nearby reads Watts Harmony. Note, no matching maternal blood on file. Law enforcement instructed immediate hold pending further ID. Second note, red ink. Transfer requested for HW, signed only with initials. BC. Kina gripped the edge of the table. Transfer requested for HW, that's Harmony. Those are her initials. Jeremiah nodded. I don't know who signed it, but I can guess. Belinda Crane, Kina said. Jeremiah closed the book. They used codes, but I wasn't blind. I logged everything, quietly. I kept it in case someone ever came back looking. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I was scared, he said simply. Not for me, for you. Once you start kicking at this thing, it doesn't stay quiet. She looked up, steady now. I don't need quiet. I need my daughter. Jeremiah slid another envelope across the table. This one held 3 carbon copies of transport records, paper slips used when bodies were moved between agencies. All 3 had the same courier code. Dove 19. Kina squinted. That's not a person. No, he said. It's a transport company. Private. Specialized in medical assists. They handled discreet removals, mostly for underfunded counties. But Dove 19? He tapped the form. That's a ghost label. Meant to leave no trace. Did they only move bodies? He met her eyes. No, they moved babies too. That night, Kina drove west past swampy stretches of highway and gutted churches to an address listed on one of the courier slips. Dove 19 Logistics. Closed, shutters nailed shut. Grass grown up through the lot. But on the door, someone had spray-painted a red X. And below it, written in what looked like permanent marker. They took our sons too. Kina stood there a long time, the humid night clinging to her like breath. She took a photo of the graffiti, saved it to her phone, and texted Elena Ford, the researcher from the Cold Case Project. Kina, you ever heard of Dove 19? A few minutes passed. Then Elena Holy H*T. I thought they were a rumor. If you found Dove 19, you found the gate. Kina stared at those last words. The gate. Her hand clenched the phone. Her daughter hadn't drowned. She'd been delivered. It was Elena's idea to search school records. Placements leave footprints. She said over the phone, her voice urgent but steady, even the off-books ones. If Harmony was delivered to a family, they would have had to do something, get her into school, get her vaccinated, build a paper trail. We just have to know where to look. Kina sat at a diner off Highway 15, a plate of untouched scrambled eggs going cold in front of her. Her fingers hovered over her phone as she stared at the screen. Elena had sent 4 maps, color-coded, showing infant relocation patterns across Louisiana and Mississippi between 2006 and 2010. Most anomalies funneled into 3 parishes east Baton Rouge, St. Helena and Livingston. Let's say she kept her birth date, Kina said slowly, or close enough to it. That would put her in 12th grade this year. Or she graduated last year, Elena added. Kina's throat tightened. 18. Her daughter could be out there walking across some stage, waving to a family that had stolen her name. I'll pull records from local yearbooks, Elena said. I have access through the university. Give me a few hours. Kina whispered thanks and ended the call. She didn't eat the eggs. She drove to a Walgreens and bought a notebook instead bright red, like the old kind she used in high school. She opened to the first page and wrote one name in block letters, Harmony Watts. Then she began to write. Every clue, every name, every lie. Because the story didn't belong to the state. It didn't belong to Dove 19. It didn't even belong to Dr. Crane. It belonged to her. That night, Elena called again. Her voice buzzed through the motel phone with static and adrenaline. I found her. Kina nearly dropped the receiver. You what? I searched yearbooks across those 3 parishes, cross-referenced them with known Dove 19 placements, and narrowed it down by birthday proximity. There's a girl who matches the build, the birthmark, everything you described. Class of 2024, Livingston Parish. Kina's heart pounded. Name? Elena took a breath. Her name is Savannah Grace Ellison. Kina repeated it softly. Savannah, adopted. Elena confirmed. The records say she was taken in by a couple, Stephen and Marla Ellison. No biological children. Wealthy. Connected to 3 other children placed through the same pediatric network. Guess who signed off as medical advisor? Crane, Kina said bitterly. I sent you the photo, Elena added. She's got your jawline, Kina. And those eyes. Kina's phone lit up. The image loaded slowly. A senior portrait. Savannah in a forest green sweater, smiling against a blurry Oak Grove backdrop. Her smile was closed, thoughtful. Her curls were a little looser, her skin a little fairer, but her eyes. They were Kina's eyes. She covered her mouth and wept into her hands. The next morning, she parked across from a white-pillared house nestled between trees and iron fences. A mailbox painted with vines, read Ellison in soft gold script. It looked like the kind of house that had never known a missing child. Through the windshield, Kina watched as a girl stepped outside. Savannah. Harmony. She was taller than Kina had imagined, long-legged, confident in the way she walked. She wore a school hoodie and carried a duffel bag slung over one shoulder. A car pulled up, and a teenage boy waved from the passenger side. She waved back and climbed in. Kina's breath caught in her throat. She didn't move, didn't speak. Just watched her daughter laugh and disappear down the road. Her hand trembled on the steering wheel. This wasn't reunion. Not yet. This was confirmation. This was truth. And truth was the only weapon she had left. She started the engine. She needed a plan. Because if Crane and the Ellisons had buried Harmony's past that deep, then coming straight through the front door would be suicide. She'd need legal backup. She'd need DNA. The trailer park sat just outside Yazoo City, nestled behind a forgotten strip of railroad and a bent aluminum sign that once read Oak Hollow Estates. Kina's car rumbled over the gravel path as she scanned faded lot numbers. Some doors hung open like missing teeth. Others were stacked with junk, yard signs, broken dull heads, and cracked plastic bins. She finally found the one lot 17. Its porch sagged. Wind chimes clanged above a crooked lawn chair. A weathered ceramic frog sat by the steps. Its paint flaked clean off one eye. Kina stepped out and knocked gently. The door opened just a crack. A woman peeked through black, early 60s, sharp eyes behind thick glasses, hair wrapped in a silk scarf. She didn't say hello. You looking for someone? The woman asked, voice gravel low. Nurse Arletta May? Kina asked. The woman blinked, slow. Who's a skin? My name is Kina Watts. That name lingered in the air like smoke. That name lingered in the air like smoke. Arletta opened the door wider. I wondered when you'd come. Inside smelled like old lavender and menthol rub. Bible verses framed in plastic hung crooked on the wall, beside faded photos of babies in plastic bassinets. Kina sat across from Arletta in the small kitchen, where a dusty fan whirred on the table between them. "You were on shift the night I gave birth," Kina said. "August 9th, 2006, Yazoo General. Room 203. Arletta didn't blink. "I remember." "I need to know what happened." Arletta looked down at her hands. They were still strong nurses' hands, the kind that held crying babies and calmed dying men. "I kept quiet for too long," she said, "but I ain't senile. I still remember the babies, especially the ones that didn't make it to morning." Kina stiffened. "Harmony made it to morning." Arletta met her eyes. "I know." She stood slowly and shuffled to a kitchen drawer, pulling out a yellow envelope wrapped in an old rubber band. She slid it across the table. Kina opened it. Inside were Copy's grainy, scanned birth logs from that week at Yazoo General. Inked names. APGAR scores. Room numbers. Times of birth. Harmony's name was there. Watts, Harmony female, 6 pounds, 13 ounces. 3:44 a.m. room 203. Mother Kina R. Watts, but someone had drawn a line through Harmony's name. Not a neat one. A red slash, diagonal and jagged, like it had been done in anger. Beside it, transferred to BC Emergency Pediatric Custody, Kina looked up. "Crane?" Arletta nodded. "Dr. Crane used to come through the hospital with orders, quiet ones. Always for the babies whose mamas were alone. No husband, no lawyer, no family in the waiting room." Kina's jaw clenched. "I was alone." She knew that Arletta said softly, "And I tried to speak up once I told the head nurse. It didn't feel right. You're lucid healthy." Harmony was healthy, 2 good lungs, strong grip. But by 7 the Ma Crane had come through and the baby was gone. Signed over labeled high risk, but there wasn't no emergency. Kina's eyes burned. "She stole her." "Yes," Arletta said, "and when I asked too many questions they moved me to geriatric care. Then let me go the next year." Kina flipped to the back of the logbook copy. There was a discharge paper, Harmony's discharge, marked 3 days after birth. The signature at the bottom wasn't Kina's. It was Marla Ellison. She forged it. Kina said she took my baby. She signed my name off. Arletta touched her hand. There were others. I don't know how many, but Harmony wasn't the only one. Kina stood breath shallow. "Can you testify to this?" "I will," Arletta said, voice fierce. "It's time." As Kina headed for the door, Arletta said one last thing. "Don't wait too long, baby girl." Kina turned. "Why?" Arletta looked out the window, her voice low. "Because if they sense you're getting close, they'll try to seal the last piece." Kina narrowed her eyes. "What's the last piece?" Arletta didn't blink her. The courthouse in Livingston Parish looked like every courthouse in the South, too white, too clean, and too proud of its own columns. Kina walked through the doors with her head high and a folder under her arm, thick with documents, the forged discharge forms, the original birth logs from nurse, Arletta the Dove 19 transfer slip, and a notarized affidavit from Jeremiah Samuels. But it was the DNA test that mattered most. 2 days earlier, Elena had helped her fast-track a court-approved mother-daughter DNA swab using hair collected from a brush dropped in the Ellisons' trash can. Kina hadn't liked sneaking around, but she wasn't about to wait on the kindness of the people who stole her daughter. The results came in the night before. 99.998% match. Savannah Grace Ellison was Harmony Watts. Her daughter. Stolen, renamed, rebranded. Now it was time to fight. The attorney across from her wore a badge-shaped pin on her lapel, and a smile full of suspicion. Young white sharp named Samantha Dorsey, Child Welfare, legal advisor for the parish. "I've read through your documents," Dorsey said, flipping through the file slowly. "It's a compelling story, but compelling and admissible are 2 different things, Kina. I can't file a custody challenge without proof of coercion or malfeasance. A bad transfer isn't always an illegal one. Someone forged my name, Kina, said I never signed over my child. Dorsey paused at the discharge form. Who's Marla Ellison? The woman raising my daughter. And you have no record of ever waiving parental rights? No court appearance, no surrender papers, nothing. And this Dr. Crane? You're accusing her of fabricating pediatric custody. She's part of a network that trafficked children under the guise of medical emergencies. Kina said, we have names, ledgers, witnesses. I can bring them all. And Dorsey studied her carefully. You're not asking for an investigation. You're asking for a declaration. You want this girl returned to you immediately. Kina nodded. I want my daughter back. The lawyer leaned back in her chair. If this goes to court, it will be ugly. The Ellisons have money. They're tied into church groups, local boards, even medical donors. Judges here know them. And Savannah? She may fight you too. Kina's throat tightened. She's 18. She's been lied to her entire life. But she deserves the truth. Dorsey was quiet for a long time. Then she said, I'll draft the preliminary order, but you need to understand something. They won't go quietly. If they even suspect what you're doing, they'll move her. She's legal now. They could disappear with her in hours. Kina nodded, cold steel in her eyes. Then I'll get to her first. That night, she drove past the Ellison home again. Lights on curtains drawn a flicker of a TV in the living room. Then she saw her Savannah sitting on the porch alone, scrolling through her phone. A soft hoodie pulled over her curls. The shape of her jaw caught the porch light just right, and Kina's heart cracked again. She looked like Kina had at 17 before the grief. Before everything, Kina pulled over across the street, turned off her engine, waited, then got out. She walked slowly, careful, not to scare her. When she reached the edge of the driveway, Savannah looked up, her eyes met Kina's. There was no flicker of recognition, just polite confusion. Hey, Savannah said cautiously, can I help you? Kina's voice came out barely a whisper. I think I'm your mother. Savannah stared at her, blinked, laughed, a little awkwardly. Sorry, what? My name is Kina Watts. You were born Harmony Watts, August 9th, 2006. Yazoo County. You were taken renamed? I've been looking for you ever since. Savannah stood slowly, one hand on her phone, the other clenched at her side. I don't know who you are, she said carefully, but my mom's inside. I think you should go. She's not your mom, Kina said gently. She never was. Savannah shook her head. You need to leave. I'll call someone. I have proof, Kina said quickly. She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out the photo, the original photo of newborn Harmony, wrapped in the green blanket. That's you. The real you. Savannah stared at it. Her lips parted slightly. She didn't take it, but she didn't look away either. I'm not here to hurt you, Kina said, voice breaking. I just want you to know. You deserve to know. The porch light flipped on behind them. The front door opened. Marla Ellison stepped out, voice clipped and alarmed. Savannah? Who is that? Savannah turned her head. She says she's my mother. Marla's eyes widened. Kina Watts, she said, venom softening each syllable. Kina stepped back. This is between me and her, she said. No, Marla said, stepping forward. This is my family, and you're trespassing behind her. Stephen Ellison appeared bigger, angrier. He reached for his phone. You have 10 seconds to leave. Savannah looked back and forth between them, Kina and Marla, between something that felt like truth and something that felt like safety. Kina didn't move until Savannah whispered, I want to see the papers. Everyone froze. Marla said, Savannah. I said, I want to see the proof. Savannah said again, louder now. If she's lying, then we prove it. But if she's not, she looked back at Kina. I deserve to know. Kina felt her knees weaken, but she nodded slowly, carefully. I'll show you everything, she whispered. Marla's voice cracked. Savannah, go inside. No, she said. I'm not a child anymore. I'm 18. If something happened before, I could understand it, then I'm going to understand it. Now Marla's lips curled, but Stephen grabbed her arm. Let it go, he muttered under his breath. Savannah looked at Kina again tomorrow public place. You bring everything I will. And for the first time, Kina saw something in her daughter's eyes that hadn't been there before. Doubt not in Kina. In the life she'd been sold, they met at a public library the next morning. Neutral ground, neutral like the wooden chairs. The buzz of the fluorescent lights, the over-politeness of the security guard eyeing them from the front desk. Savannah sat across from Kina at a corner study table near the genealogy section. No parents, no lawyers. Just a girl with a trembling notebook in her lap, and a woman who had waited 18 years to hold this moment still. I don't know what I'm supposed to feel right now, Savannah said softly. This feels fake, like one of those messed up documentaries. It's not fake, Kina said gently, sliding a folder across the table. And it's not your fault. Savannah hesitated, then opened it. Inside, the birth log from Yazoo General. The Dove 19 courier slips Jeremir's intake report Arletta May's signed affidavit. The yearbook photo annotated by Elena. And finally, the DNA report in glossy, black and white print. 99.998%. Maternal match Watts Kina R and Ellison Savannah G. Savannah stared at it for a long time. That's me? Kina nodded. You were born Harmony Watts on August 9th. You weighed 6 pounds 13 ounces. You had a birthmark on your collarbone. She paused, voice softening. You didn't drown. You were taken. Savannah's eyes blurred. They told me I was premature, that I had no birth mom willing to claim me. They lied. I have pictures in that house, Kina, from when I was 2 birthday parties, school photos. They made a new life out of stolen time. And you never got to choose. Savannah covered her face with her hands. Do you remember me? She asked, voice small. I never forgot you, Kina whispered. I celebrated every birthday. I prayed over every anniversary. And I carried your name like a wound. Savannah looked up. What now? Kina swallowed. That's up to you, but I've filed for a legal hearing. If you're willing, you can stand with me. Savannah stared at her hands. Then slowly she nodded. I want the truth out. Kina's throat clenched. Even if it means tearing up everything you've known? Savannah's voice hardened. Then let it tear. That night, Savannah didn't go home. Instead, she stayed with a college friend whose parents didn't ask questions. She turned her phone off, disappeared from the Ellisons' reach. By morning, Marla had filed a petition to block contact, citing emotional distress and coercion. But she didn't expect what came next. A court summons for a deposition filed by the Cold Case Justice Project, accompanied by federal interest and notarized proof of forgery. Suddenly, the quiet adoption turned into an explosive investigation, and Marla and Stephen Ellison? They started lawyering up. Meanwhile, Savannah went through the box Kina had kept for all those years. Inside were things that felt like ghosts. A hospital baby hat son, bleached but intact. A letter Kina had written on Harmony's first birthday. A silver rattle with the initials HW etched into one side. And a copy of the original missing persons report. Never opened, never investigated. I didn't think I'd cry, Savannah said, tracing the curve of her birth name. You don't have to be anything for me. Kina said, her voice barely a whisper. I just want you to know what was stolen. Savannah turned to her slowly. I want to help get it back. Kina blinked hard, her heart breaking and mending in the same second. There were still hearings ahead, still interviews, still battles with a system built to forget women like Kina and stories like Harmony's. But for the first time in nearly 2 decades, Kina wasn't alone, and neither was Harmony. They came hard. 2 days before the custody hearing, Kina's phone rang at midnight. It was Elena. They filed for sealed records, she said, the Ellisons. Their attorneys are arguing that the documents were unlawfully obtained and violate Savannah's medical privacy. Kina sat up in bed, heart racing. They're trying to erase the evidence? They want the DNA test thrown out, the birth logs invalidated. They're saying you broke into private trash for samples. Kina gripped the edge of the knitstand. They stole my child. I know, but they've got connections. Judges, hospital boards, even people in state welfare. They're not playing defense anymore. Kina, They're trying to bury you." Kina stared at the ceiling rage blooming under her ribs. Then we go louder. The next morning, the story broke. A podcast Elena had quietly recorded Harmony was here, aired its first episode. It featured voice clips from nurse Arletta Jeremiah Samuels and Kina's own trembling confession recorded in that motel room in Baton Rouge. By noon, #Harmony Watts was trending across Mississippi. By evening, the national papers had picked it up. Stolen black children, adoption, corruption, DNA reversals, wealth, and white families benefiting from systemic erasure. A journalist from the Clarion Ledger reached out. Then, the Advocate in Baton Rouge, then a quiet contact from someone inside the state attorney general's office. The case was no longer a whisper, it was a scream. Marla Ellison showed up at court in full white pearl blazer beige slacks and a crucifix pinned to her chest. Her expression was calm, but her hands were clenched. Savannah walked in next. She wore no makeup, no fake smile, just a simple braid jeans and a button-down blouse that belonged to Kina. She sat next to her real mother without hesitation. The courtroom buzzed with cameras. "Ms. Watts," the judge began, "do you intend to make this a criminal proceeding?" Kina stood. "I intend to make this right." A pause. The judge nodded. "Then let's hear the facts." Testimony began. Jeremiah took the stand first, his voice quiet but firm. "I was the mortician who received the body labeled Harmony Watts. I knew it wasn't her. I logged it, I kept the records, and I was told not to ask further." Then Nurse Arletta. She walked slowly to the stand, clutching her purse in both hands. "I remember that baby," she said. "Harmony born healthy and gone within hours. When I asked why, I was told she'd been moved to emergency care, but she was never brought back." Then Elena read the DNA report into court record. The judge leaned forward. "Do we have proof the discharge signature was forged?" Elena slid the original and forged documents onto the table. Compare the handwriting, the spacing, the ink analysis. This was not Ms. Watts' signature. It was filed days after she was discharged, after her child was already gone. Then the courtroom doors opened again, and a surprise witness entered, a woman in her 60s, black, thin, trembling in a smart gray coat. "I'm Dr. Sandra Noel," she said when sworn in. "I was a pediatric resident at Yazoo General in 2006. I remember Dr. Crane and I remember the pressure to comply with alternative placements. I left the hospital the following year." She looked at Savannah. "I remember you the day you were born. I remember how quiet it got after you disappeared." Marla Ellison's face went pale. Her attorney tried to object, but the judge held up a hand. "We'll let her speak." Outside the courthouse, a crowd had gathered. Not a mob, a movement, women holding signs, families holding pictures, journalists shouting questions. Savannah watched from the window as people chanted her name. She turned to Kina, her voice low. "I'm scared." Kina took her hand. "So was I, for 18 years. But you're not alone anymore." Savannah swallowed hard, then nodded. The judge called for a recess. Final ruling to come the next day, but they all felt it. The tide had turned. No matter what the court ruled, the truth had already been spoken, and the world was listening now. The courtroom was standing room only. It was the first time Kina had sat still in weeks. Her hands gripped the edges of her chair as the judge re-entered. Savannah sat beside her shoulders, stiff lips pressed in a tight line. Marla and Stephen Ellison were across the aisle, silent, pale, cornered by lawyers whispering faster than they could think. The judge adjusted his glasses, cleared his throat, and began. "I've reviewed the testimony, documentation, and affidavits submitted in this matter. While the original custody agreement was presumed legal under the court's adoption parameters at the time, overwhelming evidence now proves it was initiated through forged documents, false reporting, and medical fraud." The courtroom fell still. Therefore, the judge continued, "This court recognizes that the individual legally named Savannah Grace Ellison is in fact Harmony Watts, daughter of Miss Kina R. Watts. The original birth identity shall be restored in all state records." Savannah closed her eyes. Kina did not breathe. "In light of her age, Ms. Watts is no longer a minor and not subject to enforced custody. However, this court acknowledges that her legal identity was taken without consent. Therefore, I am ordering a full criminal investigation into Dr. Belinda Crane Dove 19 Logistics and any parties complicit in the falsification of adoption records. Whispers swept the courtroom like wind in wheat. The gavel hit once hard court is adjourned. Kina didn't move. She just looked at her daughter, the woman she knew in her bones, but was only now beginning to know in words. Harmony turned to her, and for the first time she smiled. Not a forced smile, not a polite for the courtroom smile, but hers. A piece of Kina's heart she'd been chasing through red tape and nightmares for nearly 2 decades. Now looking her in the eye alive and real, I want to keep both names, Harmony said quietly as they exited the courtroom, cameras flashing. Harmony and Savannah. Kina nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. That's yours to decide. Harmony held tight to her hand. They're both part of me now. The days that followed moved fast. Dr. Crane disappeared from her Baton Rouge practice the same night the ruling dropped. Her clinic was shuttered within 72 hours. State records went missing, but Elena and the Cold Case Project kept digging. Within weeks, the FBI confirmed over 30 undocumented infant transfers had gone through the Dove 19 network across Mississippi and Louisiana between 1999 and 2009. Kina's story became the start, not the end, of something bigger. Families started coming forward, names that had been changed, birth certificates rewritten, whole lives hidden in plain sight. And the phrase that echoed loudest through the reports, the articles, the interviews, the baby in the river wasn't her. It became a headline, a rallying cry, a reckoning. But behind all the noise in a quiet brick home in Jackson, Kina made pancakes one Sunday morning. Harmony sat on the kitchen counter, feet swinging like she had always belonged there. There was music playing Marvin Gaye on the old record player. Kina dug out just for the occasion. They didn't talk about the past that morning. They didn't need to. Harmony asked about Kina's favorite movies. Kina asked what Harmony wanted to study now that she could finally choose. They laughed about how they both hated sweet grits. And when breakfast was done, Harmony wandered into the living room and looked at the photo wall. Kina had been building her baby picture in the green hospital blanket now framed in the center. I want a photo of us together, Harmony said right there. She pointed to the empty space beside it. Kina walked over, kissed her on the cheek, and nodded. That space was always yours. Not every story ends with justice. Some just stop where the paperwork does. But if you listened closely, this wasn't just about what happened. It was about what we ignore, the assumptions we let slide, the voices we tune out because they don't come in the right tone. Somewhere someone's living with the fallout of this story, not as a headline, but as their everyday. So if this story stayed with you, don't let it fade, shine it forward. Ask more. Doubt what's too quiet, because what we choose to see or not see decides what happens next. Like, comment, share, not for clicks, but for clarity, because awareness is how silence breaks and how truth finds daylight.